Good evening, everyone. Welcome for those that are signed in already. Great to have you here. And we'll just give a couple more minutes to those joining us so we can start rolling at 7 p.m. sharp.
Hi, I just wanted to, so this is Andréane, just as a housekeeping, I lip read. And so it's quite possible that during other people, when they're talking, that I'm going to be looking away from the camera because I'll be looking at the screen trying to see what people are saying. So I just wanted to give that heads up. I am deaf, so.
Thank you for letting us know. That shouldn't be an issue. I think all the audio is working, so we should be in good shape there. All right, it is 7 p.m. and good evening to the candidates and ladies and gentlemen joining us. Welcome to our virtual federal election fireside chat for the Nickel Belt riding, hosted by the Greater Sudbury Chamber of Commerce in partnership with the Sudbury Real Estate Board and our sponsor, Collage Boreal. I'm Cora DeMarco. I'm the immediate past chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm your moderator for this evening. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting here on the Robinson-Huron Treaty territory, and the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Atikamek-Mishing and Anishinaabe First Nations and the ancestral homeland of the Métis Nation. We hope tonight's evening will assist you in casting your ballot for a member of the federal parliament on September 20th, 2021. Let us begin by introducing the candidates and outlining the rules of the procedure for tonight's event. In alphabetical order, by surname, the candidates include Andréane Chenier, New Democratic Party of Canada, Craig Gravel, Green Party of Canada, Charles Humphrey, Conservative Party of Canada, Mark Serre, Liberal Party of Canada. The candidates have been briefed on the rules of procedure for tonight's discussions, and I will outline them briefly for the audience so that you understand how the procedure will work. The rules are as follows. Each candidate will be invited in alphabetical order to address the audience for 2 minutes with an opening statement. Their microphone will be muted at the 2-minute mark. Heads up on that. Following the opening statements, I will pose a series of questions to be answered by each of the candidates. These questions will concern national issues that are important to the business community. Although the responses are not timed, we are recommending that you keep the answers to a maximum of 2 minutes per question. As the moderator, I may choose to engage with a candidate to request clarification on a response. Other candidates may also challenge a response. Candidates questioning and challenging one another can do so in a respectful manner and a courteous manner. They must not monopolize the question period as a candidate, and a time's up warning may be given if a candidate does not heed to the notice, and their microphone will be muted. Following the moderator's questions, the public question period will begin, and the questions will be answered to, or will be asked, to one specific candidate and will be posed that way. Any member of the audience wishing to have their questions asked, they must type their question in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and you can see that coming up shortly. The questions will be reviewed, and I'll pose them to the appropriate candidate. Questions will be asked in both French and English, and the questions asked in French will be posed by Chamber Director Joanne LeBreton, and bilingual candidates are encouraged to answer in French or in both official languages, whichever you're most comfortable doing. Again, we recommend that you keep your answers to a minimum of 2 minutes. Following the question and answer period, each candidate in reverse alphabetical order will have the opportunity for a final 2-minute summation. Now, I'd like to turn the talking over to the candidates because that's what we're here for. So in alphabetical order by last name, I will call on you for your introductory remarks and your opening statement. First up, I'll go to Adrienne Chenier for your opening remarks. The timer will start now.
Bonjour, I'm Adrienne Chenier, the NDP candidate for Nickel Belt. Thank you to the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce for the invitation and for your work in promoting local and supporting local businesses. I acknowledge the Robinson-Huron Treaty and the traditional territories of the Atikameksheng, Anishinaabeg, and the Wanapete First Nations, and give thanks for our ability to meet today. I've made a career out of helping people. I run a hobby farm. I see the effects of climate change. As a health and safety specialist, I've been finding solutions to complex problems affecting people, their work, and their communities. Too often, politics were the biggest problem. I'm running today because I'm tired of decisions that don't make sense to me, benefiting the very few while ignoring the needs of many. I want to put my knowledge, skills, and experience to work for you, from Gogama to Killarney, Sturgeon Falls to the Valley. You'll have my undivided attention because I want to help. Je suis fièrement franco-ontarienne et l'avenir de la francophonie dans le nord de l'Ontario me tient à cœur parce que c'est ma réalité et l'avenir de ma famille et de mes enfants. Je suis aussi intriguée par le potentiel pour les entrepreneurs francophones dans la région. On doorsteps, people have been sharing their concerns. Over and over, I've heard that we didn't need an election during this fourth wave. There were so many other things we could have been spending tax dollars on, like investing in infrastructure, creating good jobs, housing, or expanding our healthcare to include pharmacare. Trudeau's government made many fine promises over the last 6 years, but has failed to deliver on many. Billions of tax dollars given over to big businesses who profited hugely while local businesses built by our neighbors were forced to close. It doesn't have to be this way. In Northern Ontario, we know that New Democrats don't have competing interests. Our focus is on you. We live in this and raise our families in the same communities and shop in the same places. We're in the same storm. Voting for me means choosing a different way of doing things, a better way, because I've got your back.
Thank you very much for your opening comment, and I will now go to Mr. Gravel. You have the floor, Mr. Gravel.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for inviting me and participating in this debate. I also want to thank all the other candidates. Even though we are participating in this debate through Zoom, I also acknowledge the Robinson-Huron Treaty territory and the traditional territories of the Atikameksheng and Anishinaabe communities. I put my name forward as the Green Party of Canada candidate running in Nickel Belt because I want to fight for the principles and policies that I believe we need moving forward for this country. I'm fighting for policies like a guaranteed livable income, abolishing tuition, expanding healthcare to include pharmacare and dental care. And I'm also fighting for the principles that I believe in, which are accountability and holding people in power accountable for the decisions that they make. That's one thing that I want to bring as a Nickel Belt MP to the House of Commons. I believe that I have the ability to speak truth to power and have the ability to question people with power and real money to get the right answers out of politicians and to hopefully fight for policies that I believe will move us forward into the future. I am the guaranteed livable income candidate, the universal basic income candidate in Nickel Belt. This is a great policy for businesses. There's no better policy for businesses because businesses need customers with expendable cash. And that is a big problem right now in Nickel Belt, even across all of Canada. We need to stimulate the economy. Basic income is how we get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gravel, for that. And we'll turn now to Mr. Humphrey, your opening statement, please.
Hi, I'm Charles Humphrey. Thank you for inviting us to the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce. Salut les amis francophones, je suis très ici pour être ici. Je suis très content d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. And my Anishinaabic, Nujikwanyak, I say bonjour. So this election is a very simple one. With myself, you have a party, the Conservative Party, that has a plan we call Secure the Future. The 5 pillars of this plan are to secure jobs, secure accountability, secure mental health, secure our country, and secure Canada's economy. We've seen in the past year an unprecedented level of disruption in our social and economic life. We've seen a government that came together from multiple parties to give Canadians what they needed as the pandemic struck. What we then saw was a Liberal government who became fascinated with the power, the lack of accountability, and the excuse to indulge in reckless, unfocused, debt-financed spending which created the illusion that they were doing something for Canadians without the kind of results-based metrics that we need to ensure we are on a sustainable economic course. This debt-financed spending creates a certain amount of goodwill in the electorate. But as those of you who own small businesses know, it has led to labor shortages, people unwilling to work, economic depression, and inflation. The Liberal government tells us that they are looking after the Canadian economy. But we have just heard that our Q2 results, the Canadian economy has shrank by 1.1% GDP, despite the fact that we are coming out of the pandemic, even amidst the 4th wave. We have seen a drop in accountability.
I'm sorry, I'm being mindful of our time here. We are capping it at 2 minutes, and I'm displaying that we will hold firm on that now. So next I'll turn to, thank you for your comments, Mr. Humphrey. And next I'll turn to Marc Serre for your opening comments, please.
Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. Mon nom, c'est Marc Serré, le député et le candidat libéral pour la circonscription de Nickel Belt. Un grand merci tout le monde d'avoir assisté aujourd'hui. Merci à la Chambre de commerce. I also like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the Tikinishing, Anishinaabe, Winnipeg First Nations people, and the Huron-Robinson Treaty of 1850. That was provided $4 to the residents, which is totally unacceptable. And we're sharing the lands of our First Nations people that have been here for thousands of years. Alors, pour moi, c'est vraiment important d'écouter la communauté. My record speaks for itself over the last 6 years. Traveled Nickel Belt from one end to the riding, 48 communities, 3 First Nations, beautiful riding of Nickel Belt with all the lakes and the environment and good place to raise our families and our children. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for your advocacy for small and medium businesses and also been instrumental in keeping our community safe and providing that jumpstart for the relaunching of our economy. As you know, the federal government has provided over 80% of the COVID funding during this pandemic to the province of Ontario to keep your family safe, you as an individual, and also to provide you with the security through wage subsidies and business loans for your businesses. In addition to that, some businesses have fallen between the cracks. I advocated directly to the Minister's office, and FedNor came through for businesses that fell through the cracks with funding through Nickel Basin to support the small and medium businesses. Alors, pour moi, écouter les gens, s'engager avec les gens, participer activement, c'est mon record pour les derniers 6 ans. I'm asking for your support for our 3rd term. Merci, miigwech.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sere, for your comments. And thank you all for the introductory remarks that you were able to make. I will now begin with the question period, and we will call upon the candidates in random order to respond to these questions. So the first question that I would like to pose is, with the country's debt now in excess of 1.4 trillion and inflation continuing to rise, does your party have a sustainable plan to support businesses and provide immediate relief to the skyrocketing cost of living and doing business in Canada? And I will turn first to Mr. Gravel. Mr. Gravel, could I please have your response to this question?
Sure. So I believe a universal basic income, which is at the forefront of my campaign, is a great policy that will help businesses. As many know, in Nickel Belt, there are around 90,000. It's about a population of 90,000. Subtract maybe the people under 18, and you're looking at around 80,000 people. If you can think of a riding in which 80,000 people have a guaranteed income coming in on the first of every month, you can expect a lot of things happening. Number one, you can expect a lot of that money being spent locally. If there are a lot of restaurants that are having trouble, I myself am a cook. I've seen it happen. If restaurants are having trouble, giving people more money will allow them to spend that money at restaurants. When it comes to debt, I believe that in order, we need to spend money. We are spending a ton of money right now. I just don't think we're spending it the right way. And I don't think debt or inflation is something that I'm caused for concern by. When it comes to the debt, we do have a lot of debt. But at the end of the day, debt all really is all the money that the country has ever spent since its inception, minus taxes. And in order to put investment into the economy, you have to spend. So I believe that the debt and the inflation isn't something that we should be worrying about. It's not something that businesses should be worrying about. We can spend the money that we're already spending right now. It's just we're not spending it in the right way. I want to help working class and small businesses, and a universal basic income is how we go about that.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'll have to leave them there and turn to the next candidate in interest of time. And to the next candidate who I'd like to have answer this question would be Ms. Chenier. If you could please go ahead with your response.
Yes. So for us, stimulating the economy means investing in infrastructure, investing in Medicare, investing in pharmacare and housing. And by doing so, what we'd be doing is creating local economies. We'd be creating jobs in our different communities. By investing in that infrastructure, we'd also be reducing overall costs, and we'd be removing some barriers and leveling the playing field so that everybody can have success. When it comes to very specifically for local businesses, some of the things that we are planning to put in place include making sure that that economic relief benefit that was provided to businesses during COVID actually extends all the way to the end when they're completely reopened and they've fully restaffed, in order to make sure that businesses are in a position to hire or rehire long-term staff. We're also planning on making a contribution to pay for EI and CPP portion to make sure that we are in a position to hire that staff that needs work. We'd be also adding in other measures to ensure that we'd be capping unreasonable fees like the fees that are placed on, say, for example, credit card providers. We'd be capping that at 1%. And all of our infrastructure projects would include putting in energy efficient retrofits to homes, building homes. We'd be putting infrastructure into being better services so that businesses, small businesses would be able to have the services that they need at an affordable price, and that it's a service that actually makes sense. In addition, we'd be boosting, okay, fair enough.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you nodding on the hand signals as well. Very, very helpful. So I'll thank you very much, Ms. Chenier, for your response. And I'll now turn to Mr. Serre for your response, please.
Thank you for that very important question. And yes, cost of living, affordability. I hear this. I've heard it as an MP during the term. I've heard it in the last two elections, also in 2015, 19, and today. And it's really important with the pandemic. As a federal government, we feel we had no choice but to support individuals, to support businesses through these difficult times. This is a worldwide pandemic. When we look at the burden that the federal government, adding the cost on the debt, the federal government has a very low interest. We still have today the second in the G7 country, the lowest debt to ratio and a AAA rating. So our economy can sustain this. But what more important here is how do we look at restarting our economy? And that's the important part here. So our government has proposed childcare, affordable childcare. Very important. And we're doing it. We have 8 provinces and territories signing agreement. You'll have 2 conservative provinces that haven't signed yet. Hopefully that will happen shortly. When we look at infrastructure, we funded highways $169 million. That creates jobs. Infrastructure is a good way to have good paying jobs. When we look at the green economy, we've put over $60 billion now, close to with our commitment now over $100 billion for a green economy. Sudbury is a good example. With the mining community, the environment, we could do both. And it's very important. Also, the Safe Start Agreement. We've provided funding to help with schools, to help with long-term care facilities. St. Joseph and St. Gabriel here locally received dollars from the Safe Start Agreement. So we've been there partnering with the provincial government. And that's why it's important that we do this together, federally and provincially, to make sure that we restart our economy and we make it happen. Thank you. I see the hands.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I see there is a hand up. I will hold that comment until each candidate has had an opportunity to provide their initial response. And the last candidate who I will call on to do that is Mr. Humphrey. So please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've seen unprecedented levels of debt and inflation. We are learning as a nation at this time that money is not wealth. Wealth is generated through the production of goods and services, through the businesses that you yourself run and which this chamber represents. The Conservative government is directly focused on getting business started by making it easier for people and more profitable for people to start businesses, small businesses, the kinds that have been hurt by the pandemic. Although not in our riding, what comes to mind as somebody who lives and works near Sudbury is downtown Sudbury and the hollowing out of downtown cores across the country. We have a plan to help workers get back to work by supporting businesses with 25% to 50% wage assistance for businesses that hire people who've been unemployed during the pandemic, as well as a Main Street loan that will provide a 25% tax credit on amounts up to $100,000 to get people investing in the local economy. It is critical that we wean the population and the Canadian economy off government debt finance spending and get ourselves back to productivity. We have lost our competitive edge. We have lost innovation. We've lost investment at an unprecedented rate through the past 6 years of Liberal rule. It is time to reverse the investment drain and the innovation drain, which has sucked Canada's economy dry. Although Monsieur Serre speaks of mining and development, it is well known across this country that the Liberal government has crushed our ability to conduct large-scale resource projects and infrastructure projects through endless red tape and spurious impact assessments that have no true impact, no true effect on the sustainability and the effectiveness of projects, but are simply meant as exercises to further burden. Yes, Kate.
Thank you very much for your response. And I imagine that we have some comments that other candidates may want to have a debate on, which we will allow for a limited time. I noticed, Andréane, you had your hand up. Did you have a comment that you wanted to make in response to another candidate? Because we will allow that to occur now if you'd like to go ahead. And anybody else who has a future comment, you can use your button on your screen to raise your hand and we'll call on you in order.
Thank you. One of the comments that I had is that to my colleague, Mr. Serré, that we're being promised childcare again and again and again. The childcare promise from the Liberals is over 30 years old. So at this point, the question I would then have is, why should we believe that this will be, in fact, the year that the Liberal government would, in fact, do it? Because 30 years.
Thank you. We'll turn to Mr. Serré for a response to that question.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that question. And yes, I'm on the Status of Women Committee, National Status Committee. I'm here to clear. And this used to be an issue, daycare, more of a feminist question. But now the Chamber of Commerce's, the Sudbury Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has now, the business community has put their voice that this is an economic recovery. So now to answer the question specifically, I'll mention two things. First off, we have signed agreements with 8 provinces. This is not a promise. We have actual signed agreements. This was in the budget 2021. It's there. We have a process. So now we just have 2 other provinces. So if the province of Ontario will encourage all of us to communicate with the Queen's Park to ensure. And also, I want to just remind my honorable colleague that 2006, the Paul Martin government had a signed agreement with all 10 provinces, and it was a minority government, and the NDP voted against it to go into an election to kill the childcare and to kill Kelowna Accord. So let's set the record straight. We are the government that's putting childcare in place. We have the signed agreements in place with 8 of the 10 provinces and the territories, and it's going to happen. And the women and businesses and families need this, and it's going to happen. And it's happening right now.
Thank you for your response. And just a quick follow-up to your response. I understand that the agreements are signed with various provinces and territories. Is that contingent on the remaining signatures for the plan to go ahead or not?
Well, each
Just
of the
for
provinces.
the members to understand.
Correct. So each of the provinces that have signed the agreement, now the process could start with the childcare. So the only 2 provinces that haven't signed it. So we're looking forward. But yes, the signed agreement is there, and a new government, if there is a new government that would go back on this, I think would be very, 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 very sad for the economy, for our families, for our business communities, because this is $10 a day for families of all incomes. So very, very important to have that versus a credit. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it. Were there any other follow-up questions or comments before we move to the next question? Hearing none, seeing none. So I will proceed with our next question. The next question, just a reminder to the candidates on the screen, I will call on you in random order to respond. And the question is, with the continued supports being offered to individuals during the pandemic, for example, the CERB, CERB, combined with businesses in our community and across the country continuing to express labor shortages, what are your party's plans, if any, to access our own available labor force to kickstart our economy and support prosperity across Canada? And I will turn to Mr. Humphrey first for your response to this question. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I'll reiterate our pledge to provide a 25% tax credit on amounts of up to $100,000 for small businesses. We're looking to get businesses, in addition, we're looking to get businesses to hire back people who have lost jobs due to the pandemic. We're trying to wean the Canadian population that needed a measure of support throughout the pandemic when jobs were lost. and start encouraging people to get back to work by winding down those programs, at the same time providing businesses with an economic incentive and help to hire those people. The idea is to stop providing the stimulus that is discourage people from working and start providing a stimulus to encourage people from working. In addition, we have well-planned, well-financed plans to provide training for Canadians to ensure that people have the apprenticeship opportunities, including women, to get, with a focus on women, to get people into the trades that this country needs. We have had a change in the economy. We have had a change in the types of jobs, and it's important not that we continue paying people to not work, but to provide them with the opportunities to do the training they need to get the kind of good paying, stable jobs that Canadians want and that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your response. And next we'll turn to Mr. Serre. If I could have your response, please, to the question posed.
Thank you very much for the question. And I just want to clarify. So the CERB has ended. Now that's the CRB, that's $300 a week. And that's a phase of a process that is happening with now the restarting of the economy. So I just want to clarify that it's not $2,000, a month. It's now the $300 because of the economy is starting to pick up, and that's, so I just want to clarify that. The other element here that we hear clearly, a labor shortage. I've been a member of parliament for the last 6 years, and mayors of all municipalities here in Northern Ontario, all Chamber of Commerces have indicated there was a skill shortages prior to the pandemic. And that's why worked really hard with the mayors and chambers and in Ottawa to establish a rural immigration pilot project that is in place now. To grow our economy, we need at least 5,000 newcomers to maintain the economy. And we're piling this on the Atlantic Immigration Project, and that's really important. The other element that our government has done is we provided trainings to unions like the carpenters unions and other trade unions here locally to buy equipment, to train staff, to look at apprentices. So this is an important part because there is a skill shortage way before the pandemic. So it's really important to look at that element of the plan. And obviously, as I indicated, when we look at trying to attract individuals here, it's really important that we look at how can we support them and grow the area itself. So the Chamber has been active on this, and this is very important for us as a government to ensure that we support our business community, but there is a lack, and we're looking at those investments with the trade unions and with the municipalities and with the mayors. Merci.
Thank you very much for your timely response. And next, I will turn to Mr. Gravel. If I could have your response, please, to the question we posed.
Sure, and thank you. I'm hearing a lot of terms being floated around: labor shortage, skill shortage. I think the fact of the matter is we're actually in a wage shortage. I've also heard other candidates say that CERB will pay you to do nothing. I am a huge supporter of a universal basic income, as you can see in the photo behind me. Universal basic income doesn't actually pay to do nothing. It actually pays you to do anything. When it comes to skill shortages, the answer is to abolish tuition. We want people going to school to pick up those skills, especially when it comes to the trades. I went to Humber College and I earned a millwright techniques certificate. Unfortunately, the pandemic kind of put a halt in that, but I'm going to try to go back into that. Universal basic income will actually bring jobs back. When you think about a community where everyone's has a basic income, that means that people have more spending power. And when people have more spending power, that means they're going to spend in businesses. And when businesses have more people spending, that means that they're going to have to hire people. And when they hire people, they're going to actually have to pay higher wages, because nobody's going to take a job anymore where they're being exploited or overworked. And I think that's, I want to come from a working class perspective in this. I understand business is important, and that's why I think that UBI is the way forward. It will stimulate the economy, and abolishing tuition is where we address the skill shortage there. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your response as well. And last but not least, we will turn to Ms. Chenier for your response, please.
Thank you. First off, I want to start by saying that when I hear the words weaning people off, it may really give the connotation that people are lazy, when in fact, it's quite possible that the jobs that they were looking for were no longer available to them because there was an unprecedented closings of the number of businesses. So to start with, I would also say that my esteemed colleague, Mr. Serry, also made reference to the CRB and how useful it was to help people remain in their homes and to remain safe during periods of uncertainty. But I'd also point out that the Trudeau government has cut that assistance down from $2,000 to $1,200 before the pandemic recovery has been complete. Businesses are not all open yet. We haven't seen a full reopening of the local economy. And so to this idea that we can just drop everything and go back is a little premature in our estimation. And this is one of the reasons why the NDP will continue that support for small businesses so that they can continue to be operational until full reopening is possible. In addition, for us, it's not just about having a job, because having an unpaid internship is a job, but that doesn't actually put food on the table and it doesn't put a roof over your head. So our plan actually looks at creating good jobs with good wages that have good working conditions and where we're removing the precarity. And to us, that's actually the pathway forward to a good recovery, because the middle class is really how we're going to have a rolling economy that will be good for everyone. And in order to make that available, we have a plan where we're going to make post-secondary education available in ways that aren't going to lead to mountains of death, so that workers can reskill and retrain.
Thanks very much for your response. And we'll now turn to the debate section to discuss this issue any further. And I'm noticing that Mr. Humphrey has his hand up, so I will turn to him first for his initial response and then follow in order from there using the hand signal.
Yes, I just want to thank my esteemed colleague, Madame Chenier, for her reference. I just like to clarify, those of you who run businesses understand that economics and finance, the existence of money itself, is primarily a structure of motivation, okay? The way that we structure economic life will have a profound impact on the choices people make. Money is symbolic. And it's important that when we create fiscal policies, when we design programs, that we are aware of the motivational factor in the way it's going to affect the choices that Canadians make. This is not a simple question of platitudes in terms of giving more or giving less, or it's a question of how do we structure our economic life? How does the government structure its support programs in such a way to get the kind of outcomes that this country needs to lead itself to fiscal sustainability? This is not an idle question this time. We are a country that has known great wealth historically, but we are in a place we no longer have the kind of material wealth in terms of manufacturing and service economy that we used to. It is important that Mr. Serre points out, we have good credit at this point. We do not have wealth, we have good credit. But that, as we have learned from numerous economies, including Argentina in the late 80s and early 90s, that can go away very quickly. The American economy was once considered, their credit rating was once considered unassailable. And we know that after the 2008-2009 crisis, it was downgraded. To have it downgraded, to have our interest rates grow, would be catastrophic, given the kind of debt finance spending the Liberals are proposing. And so I say, please do not be fooled by the promises of grand spending, but recognize that we, the Conservative government, are the party that recognizes that we must carefully structure the motivations of Canadians to get the outcomes we need as a nation to be able to sustain the quality of life and the quality of social services that we've all come to expect. Thank you.
Thanks for that additional comment. And I will turn back to Ms. Genier for her response as she has her hand up now.
I reiterate, when I hear motivation, what I'm hearing is that somehow people who needed this ERB benefit were somehow lazy and not, in fact, at the whims of the pandemic conditions, which were imposed on them by, different types of leadership. And so for us, we actually see the creation of jobs, good jobs, like jobs with good working conditions and good wages, that is in fact stimulated by investments in infrastructure as a very good way to restart the economy, because in those ways, we're going to have workers who will have good jobs. They will have money to spend in their local economy as they are going to be spending those dollars in their as in the local economy. So from my perspective, structured motivation sounds incredibly negative and disrespectful for the people who were put in a bad place by a situation beyond their control.
Thank you very much for the follow-up to that question. And I see there's another hand raised, so we will go to Mr. Gravel, who also has a response he'd like to provide. So please, you have the floor.
I'm going to try to keep this short. One of the problems with CERB is that if you made over a given amount in a month, I believe it was $1,000 in a month, you would lose your entire benefit. That is a work disincentive. I believe that if you want to keep people working, you have to allow them to keep that benefit. If you allow them to keep that benefit, they will keep working. And the only people that don't work, or the only people that work less while earning a benefit like CERB or universal basic income are students and new parents, which is a good thing. So yeah, CERB, the $1,000 taken away from you if you made more than $1,000, that was a work disincentive. The idea is to allow them to keep it. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll leave this topic here and we'll move to the next question in the interest of time. The third question that I will pose and have each candidate respond to is, housing supply issues have a fairly significant impact on long-term housing affordability. What can the federal government do to help with housing supply issues across the country? And I will turn to Ms. Chenier for your response first, please.
When it comes to housing, we believe that housing is not a commodity, that it is in fact a necessity in order to be able to fully develop ourselves as Canadians in functional Canadians, productive Canadians. And so because of leadership that allowed speculation and runaway housing prices, we're actually going to put a stop to that by imposing some taxation on foreign investors and people who are basically just making a business out of buying and reselling homes at a greater profit. We also have a plan in place to invest in that infrastructure because to us, it is critical that our children are able to purchase a home in the community in which they were raised, and we don't want to see them priced out. So our plan sees 250,000 units built in the first 5 affordable housing units built in the first 5 years, doubled to that in 10 years. And we also have other package of other solutions that would make in total 1.7 million units available to individuals. And that would be through a range of options, either through like outright purchasing or rental subsidies or rental units, or geared to income housing or other forms of social housing.
Thank you very much for that response. And I will turn now to Mr. Gravel for your response, please.
So I and the Green Party of Canada believe that housing is a human right. We need to look into a lot of solutions that will help fix the housing crisis problem. I myself am a young person. It's hard for myself to find a place to purchase, let alone rent. The the way we do that, again, I'm going to say it again, is by implementing a guaranteed livable income, giving people more money to allow them to find a place that they can stay is part of the solution. Other solutions are looking into different types of housing. I myself I'm single, I'm young. There's plenty of rural land in Nickel Belt, and a lot of people are very interested in tiny homes. A lot of people are interested in different forms of housing. That is something that I'm interested in bringing forward to Nickel Belt. Another thing is cutting down on foreign home buying, like the NDP candidate said. We don't want people using homes as a way to pad their wallets or as a way to make money off of people who need the shelter. And so, yeah, it really comes down to, one, giving people the money that they need so that they can afford the rent. Two, looking into different housing options through co-op or tiny homes. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your response, and we'll turn to Mr. Humphrey now for his reply.
Well, there are a number of issues that underlie the current housing crisis in Canada. One of which is a lot of red tape that's preventing the expansion of housing supply, particularly in our urban areas. There are too many regulations preventing an increase in supply in the housing market. As we know, if we can increase the supply, we're going to reduce costs. That's one of our biggest challenges here. That's why we've committed to building 1 million homes in the first 3 years of a Conservative government. Listen when my colleague, Mrs. Serre, repeats the same promise, as I'm sure he will. I know they like the idea too, so I'm sure they'll be bringing it up as well. We also need to tackle money laundering. Money laundering is a serious issue in Canada. We are one of the #1 destinations for money laundering, for illicit gains. And our housing market is certainly one of the places that corrupt entities have chosen to park their money. We also need to change mortgage rules, particularly for small businesses, to ensure that small business owners who don't have the kind of predictable income that wage earners like myself have can still get equal access to mortgages. We want to provide longer term mortgages to give more sustainable, more predictable financing options. Finally, as is sort of the theme here, we need to crack down on foreign buyers who do not intend to occupy homes. The Conservative government will restrict foreign buyers who do not intend to move to Canada and will instead encourage them to purchase homes in order to create rental units, in order to increase the supply of usable housing in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And we'll turn to the final response from candidate Mark Serre. Please go ahead.
Thank you. And yes, housing is such an important, critical part of families and communities. And yes, in the past, sky pricing was more of an urban issue, and now it's spread across with COVID. Now, for some reason, it's spread across the country. I would encourage all of you to really, and we don't have time in 2 minutes, but to really dive into the platforms. Yes, we have similar strategies. Every party's focused on a housing strategy, but let's look at the facts here. Since 2017, we've put dollars for the first time ever. The federal government for the past 30 years was not in the housing market. It was up to the municipalities and the province. We've put now $72 billion for a national housing strategy. We have Indigenous housing. We have also, when you look at the importance here of converting empty spaces, we put $600 million to do that for housing. We're looking at building new homes, retrofitting. The greater city of Sudbury has hundreds of homes that were built in the 70s that need to be supported. Just recently, made an announcement with the greater city of Sudbury for homelessness. That's part of the issue that we need to $7.4 million just for the greater city of Sudbury, because the homelessness and the transition is really important. So all of that to say, and just an example here, just in Coniston, 55 units for seniors housing. This is a model. Before, urban centers, large centers were getting the funding. Now, because of the work that we've done as a rural caucus within the government, within cabinet. Now we have a rural strategy for housing, and Coniston is a good model here with 55 units for seniors that we're going to look at across Northern Ontario. So it's a complex overall issue that we need to look at with banks, need to look at CMHC, but importantly, we need to make sure that we work with the province, we work with the municipalities, and we work with local organizations that make it happen. We've funded brain injury in Sudbury also a few years ago. So it's really important to look at the continuum of housing and how important it is. And I encourage all of you to look at the platforms because this is a very important issue. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seri, for your reply. I see there is a hand up. I'm being conscious of time, so I will have to pass on the rebuttal for this section and move to the next question that we have, which is going to be posed in both official languages by our board director, Joanne LeBreton. So I will turn it over to you, Joanne.
Thank you, Cora. Hello, everyone. So my question is, what is your party's plan to encourage immigration, and especially Francophone immigration, where current government's targets are not close to being met, to Canada, to Ontario, and to Greater Sudbury in particular? Quel est le plan de votre parti pour encourager l'immigration, en particulier l'immigration francophone, dont on n'atteint jamais les cibles actuelles au Canada, en Ontario et particulièrement dans la région du Grand Sudbury? Candidates are encouraged to answer this question in both languages, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. And we will turn to Mr. Seri for his response. Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup pour la question importante. Puis je l'ai adressée un peu tantôt au niveau de mes commentaires originaux lorsqu'on regarde la main-d'œuvre. Alors, le programme francophone, ils ont développé un programme spécifique pour encourager les entreprises anglophones d'embaucher des francophones dans des pays comme l'Afrique et d'autres pays francophones de tout le monde ici pour alors, il y a un programme francophone. Nous avons comme gouvernement mis en place à peu près 12 millions pour supporter l'ensemble de ce programme ici. As I said also earlier, that all the mayors, all the Chamber of Commerces came, and business community came to us to get a rural immigration project. And we put this together within a year, which is unheard of. If anybody wants to follow legislation and programs to put this in such a fast pace. And the important with the rural immigration pilot project is we need, as I said, we need at least 5,000 newcomers to maintain the economy that we have. It's so important. And I want to mention for all of you listening, please, the number one issue that I get on my Facebook page, negativity, is when I promote immigration, skill attraction of newcomers. For some reason, we get attacked on social media, and ask all of you to push back on this. It's so important that, yes, we look at training our youth here, we look at training in the post-secondary, we work with the business community, but we need to attract people. So please call this out on social media, call this out in the community. We need to make sure that we have immigration, and I think we all agree upon this as all parties. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Seri, for that response and lots of energy. And I'll turn to Mr. Humphrey for your reply, please.
So, on est très chanceux comme un pays qui a une telle bonne qualité de vie. Il y a beaucoup à travers le monde qui aimeraient venir ici. Et c'est une faillite de la part de notre gouvernement qu'il n'arrive pas, avec les qualifications qu'on a vraiment une grande demande, n'est pas capable de venir ici de façon efficace. Nous, comme gouvernement conservateur, on va faire des améliorations pour faire certain qu'on reconnaît les qualifications étrangères et pour faire un processus plus rapide pour que ceux qui ont des qualifications et des habiletés dont on a besoin, ils puissent revenir ici et plus vite pouvoir travailler dans leur métier dont ils ont de l'expertise. En plus, on supporte la création d'un réseau université, de réseau d'universités francophones, commençant avec l'université de Sudbury, parce qu'on croit que c'est avec notre système d'éducation, surtout système d'éducation francophone, qu'on puisse attirer les plus brillants lumières de la jeunesse internationale. Et c'est avec un focus sur l'attraction des francophones et des anglophones d'ailleurs qu'on va pouvoir donner aux besoins de l'économie canadienne. On va aussi faire certain qu'on maintient le poids démographique des francophones à travers le Canada, en encourageant l'immigration francophone dans des régions comme Nickel Belt, dont on voit une dilatation, dilution de la poids démographique qui n'est pas arrêtée jusqu'à ce point. Il faut qu'on préserve la riche culture et unique de notre communauté francophone avec l'immigration. Merci.
Thank you very much for that response. And we will turn to Ms. Chenye for your reply, please.
Merci. Mais pour être capable d'attirer du talent ici, une des choses qu'il faut avoir, c'est qu'il faut avoir une économie locale qui est diversifiée et puis qui est riche. Et puis pour ça, ce que ça veut dire, c'est qu'il va falloir être capable de stimuler le développement, la stabilité et puis le développement d'entreprises francophones dans la région. Ça, c'est très difficile à faire si on n'a pas si on n'est pas capable d'attirer aussi le talent à l'université, à notre université locale. Ce qui s'est passé avec le débâcle qui s'est passé à la Laurentienne, évidemment, a fait ses ravages. Et puis, on a vu, évidemment, la fermeture de tellement de programmes qui auraient été attrayants pour attirer des gens ici et puis pour être capable de les former pour qu'ils puissent après ça être des membres productifs de la société. Alors, pour nous, en partant, pour être capable d'attirer des gens, il faut avoir quelque chose avec lesquels les attirer. In addition, one of the things that we want to see, and this is part of our platform, is that we want to make it easier to recognize credentials and expertise that has been that's been obtained in a different country, but that is very much relevant to the area in which individuals want to reside. So, for example, when they come here to Nickel Belt, if they're Francophone, then they're going to want to be able to live their life fully in French. In addition, just because we are stimulating immigration and we're actively bringing people to the country and actively bringing them here to the Nickel Belt, we have to remember that people they're not hatched alone. They have families. And so part of our platform is we're also going to help their families and their immediate families and their grandparents to come and to create their family here. So in that way, we'd be stimulating not just immigration, but we would be stimulating families and retention staying in this community so that it's diversified and gets better. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have to have you leave it there in the interest of time. And finally, we will turn to Mr. Gravel for your thoughts on this question.
Thank you for the question. We need to encourage immigration here in Canada. The Green Party of Canada, as well as myself, support more immigration. Part of that is actually accepting refugees from all over the world, from whatever crisis they're facing. This includes Afghanistan and what's going on over there. This also includes taking in refugees who are affected by the climate crisis. We need to encourage more French immigration. Part of doing that is by updating the Official Languages Act. As many people in the French community know, it is an act that hasn't been updated in quite some time. And for many, that is a bit of a danger towards the French language here in Canada. So that's something that we definitely need to do. I'm sorry, my French is not the best. I did end up taking French until 12th grade. It has lost me a bit, but I apologize for that. But just because my French is not up to par, I don't think that means that that my interest in caring for the French language and official languages here and encouraging immigration, I don't think that that should be a problem.
Thank you for your response. And I rely on Joanne to help me out from time to time, so understood. And with that, I see there is one hand up, and I want to be conscious of the audience's questions. So I will turn the floor over to the audience's questions in the interest of time and making sure that we cover everybody's interest. So the first question that I would pose is to Mr. Serre. And the question is, Prime Minister Trudeau has announced his plans on increasing the tax rates for big banks, as well as big insurance companies, i.e. the banks and the insurance companies answer to their shareholders who are looking for a return on investments. Therefore, the response these companies will probably have to counter these tax increases will be to increase the middle class's fees and premiums. Has the Liberal Party taken into consideration the impact that this will have on the middle class? And how exactly is this beneficial to the average Canadian? And we will time these responses in order to maintain quorum here. So please go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and interesting the way the question was framed, because when you talk about big banks and insurance companies, there is a lot of concern, not only from our government, but all parties and the Canadian population, that there's been record profits. So I would be cautious. I think it's an opportunity for all levels of government. And I know the chamber here focuses on, well, there are some large businesses here in the Greater Sudbury, but the majority is small and medium businesses, and that's our focus for economic growth, for focus to build our economy here. But I believe in the platform that we put in place that we need to make banks more accountable and to give back to the community. And I wouldn't be concerned about, I don't know if this, I'm not sure where the question came from in Sudbury here about the threat that there will be, increasing fees. I think the banks have an opportunity here. We have a solid banking system in Canada, one of the best in the world. And I think adding their fair share to balance the economy and get the economy going, I think a lot of the CEOs and banks here are part of our community and want to give back. And I think it's an opportunity here to work together with them to make this happen. So I make no apologies for our platform, and I'm strongly behind it. Thank you.
Thanks for the response. I know that the question was geared specifically around, is there something in place currently and in the motivation behind the banks to increase cost, to download that onto the Canadian. So that was highlighted there for sure. Now, I want to go to the next question, which is posed to Ms. Chenier of the NDP. And the question is, local federal candidates, as well as federal leaders, including Prime Minister Trudeau and the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, now have shown a willingness to call out the spending decisions of the provincial levels of government and suggest that they would handle such spending differently. How could you counsel municipal politicians on how they should handle municipal spending of hundreds of millions of dollars on wants, such as arenas, galleries, libraries, while at the same time saying that they need federal money to pay for municipal responsibilities like needs, like municipal infrastructure, like roads and housing? And I'll leave that question to you.
Well, I have to admit that I'm a bit confused by this question, because a lot of the things that were raised were actually entirely municipal in nature, and if not, they were provincial. What federal governments do is they may earmark projects. They may actually earmark dollars to be used by provinces or by municipalities for very specific issues. So, for example, they may ask for some core funding to increase, say, for example, a new arena. But how those municipalities, in fact, and the provinces operationalize those things are very much the purview of those governments. And so for us, we would be looking at whether or not the project is worthwhile, whether it fits within our desire to stimulate the economy, to invest in infrastructure, to stimulate businesses. And after that, that would be something that would be up for the local governments to deal with.
Thank you for that response. And the next question we have is for Mr. Humphrey, the Conservative candidate, and I will read the question now. Since seniors are so often the victim of scams, what, if anything, does your party plan on doing about it? Since fraudsters can open bank accounts online without having to go into a bank or require banks to take why not require banks, to take a photo ID of a bank account holder when opening new accounts?
Thank you. We, the Conservative government, take the security and the safety of Canadians and their financial transactions very seriously. We have proposed a number of measures to rein in corrupt financial practices and to increase enforcement against both criminals who may misuse our banking system for nefarious purposes such as money laundering. We also have plans to tackle anti-competitive price fixing within the banking system and within the Canadian economy more generally. And so what we're looking to do is we're looking to bolster the teeth of our financial enforcement agencies to ensure that Canadians can feel secure in using their banking system, that whatever system banks may use themselves, we're there to ensure that the regulations and the enforcement powers necessary to protect Canadians are there. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. And I will now pose a question to Mr. Serre. This one's from the chat box. And the question is, many Canadians are questioning why Trudeau and the Liberal Party are putting the desire for a majority of government ahead of the health and safety of Canadians. Our country is now in what many think is a reckless election during a deadly fourth wave. Do you think this election was a good decision? If so, please tell us why. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Serre.
Thank you for that question. And my focus for the past 6 years and during this election is focusing on the people of Nickel Belt. I've crisscrossed the country, the 48 communities, the 3 First Nations, and I've been listening actively to people, their concerns, and moving forward. When we look at we have to remind the fact we have a minority government. And it's odd now that oppositions are talking about why we're having an election in a minority government when there has been confidence votes, there has been indications by all leaders that our prime minister has to go, the government has to go. Finally, our prime minister, in 2 years into a mandate, and I want to be clear to our listeners here, a minority government on average lasts about a year and a half. This is the 4th longest serving minority government in the history of Canada. So I appreciate the anxiety that people have through COVID, but this is when we did the election in 2019, COVID was not in place. We didn't talk about relaunching the economy. Now we need to put forward, and now all of the parties have put forward their platform to move the economy forward, to look at a green economy, to look at childcare, to look at how do we look at getting our economy going and competing in the world. Canada has a lot of innovation. Canada has a lot of skills, a lot of talent. So I believe in the people of Nickel Belt, Northern Ontario, Greater Sudbury, and I know that we will set up this challenge, and we need to make sure that we have a mandate to look at relaunching the economy. And now we have all the parties here discussing ideas, discussing platforms, debating them, which is wonderful. And the people of Nickel Belt and the people of Canada will decide on the approach moving forward. And this is an opportunity, this is democracy, and it's an opportunity versus, because in September and October, the minority government has elections and votes all the time, and it could have fallen in the fall. So thank you.
Thank you for your reply to the question. And we will now pose a question to Mr. Humphrey. And this question is from the chat box. It reads, given that there are many businesses in the hunting and sport shooting industry in Nickel Belt, and I'll add anecdotally that the season is upon us, if elected, would your government vote to repeal Bill C-71 and instead focus on gangs and gun smuggling, not law-abiding vetted citizens?
Thank you for that question. I think it's no secret that we, the Conservatives, stand up for law-abiding legal gun owners in this country. This Liberal government, over the past 6 years, has targeted us in order to hide the fact that they are unwilling and unable to tackle the true source of gun crime in Canada. They have used gun crime in the GTA, in shootings using illegal weapons, as pretext for going after legitimate sport shooters who enjoy recreational shooting with guns that have already been subject to legislation that limit their ability to be used for nefarious purposes. These are well-vetted, well-regulated, well-monitored people who have been consistently one of the most law-abiding segments of Canadian population. We will abolish all of the recent ineffective, unfair regulations the Liberals have brought in since the Trudeau government took power in order to focus on the gangs and the illegal guns coming across the border. We will strengthen the Canadian Border Services Agency, and we will increase the police presence in those areas in the GTA, in Vancouver and Montreal, where we see the highest rate of violent crime using these illegal weapons. It is inexcusable that the Liberal government has punished law-abiding gun owners and gun businesses in order to hide the fact that they have failed to protect Canadians by failing to invest in the police forces and the tough on crime agenda that is necessary to tackle the reality of gun violence in this country. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. And we do have another question here. This question is for Mr. Serre. And the question reads, Laurentian has been in a process not designed to dismantle. From Indigenous affairs to Francophone affairs, many of the ways a federal government could intervene were not exercised and instead left to the provincial counterparts. Currently, we have lost 30% enrollment and there have been no commitments or counteractions to those effects. This question is for all candidates. I will refrain that it's for Mark specifically. Why do you feel Laurentian is dismantling why do you feel that Laurentian's dismantling is a federal issue and what will your party do? I'll turn it to you, Mr. Serre.
Thank you for that very important question. I've been clear since day one. The federal government is laying here in post-secondary institution is twofold. Research. So we've been the government that's provided historic funding, $6 billion in research, and Laurentian University, Snow Lab here locally, has received a lot of that funding from the federal government. The second component that the federal government is responsible for is francophone education in les situations minoritaires, de linguistique à travers du pays. So that's the other element. The federal government is not responsible for operational funding, and it's indigenous from other parties to suggest that. Let's make it clear. The Laurentian University failure is a failure of the Ford government for not stepping up to the table with Laurentian University. The federal government has been there. I've advocated with Ménélé Joly, Minister Freeland, our Prime Minister. And so let's be clear. We've put in budget 2021, $121 million. Yesterday, our Prime Minister came here and provided $80 million to now provinces across $80 million annually, and that's what the Francophone community was asking for. So now the provinces have a stable funding for Francophone services. Laurentian University will be a strong Anglophone university, and unlike the NDP leader, we believe that Université de Sudbury should be a university Francophone for the people of Northern Ontario, by the people of Northern Ontario. We've been clear on that. So let's talk about these issues, but let's be clear. The provincial government, federally, we do not have a minister responsible for college and universities. So that does not exist. So it's really, really hard on the families. I understand that. It's hard on the economy.
Mr. Serre,
Laurentian has been a big part of our community.
Okay,
We need to
thank
continue
you.
to support this. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you for your response. Noting that there is a hand up, we are going to maintain our plan of moving forward with the the questions directed specifically for candidates. And this next question is posed to two candidates specifically. So the questions will go to Mr. Serre and Ms. Chenier, and I will go to Ms. Chenier first. And the question is, universal drug plan has been posed by both the Liberal and the NDP parties. With this plan being said, how will each party adopt a universal drug plan, making sure that those with a collective agreement and drug plans, that they maintain those drug plans with this plan going forward of a universal plan? So please, can I have your response? I'll leave you the floor.
Well, first off, I just wanted to respond to the idea that that the NDP is not supporting of the autonomous nature of University of Sudbury. We believe that that is indeed the path forward. And we had letters from Jagmeet to Justin Trudeau demanding funding for that standalone autonomous university back in April. So this idea that we are somehow not supportive of the University of Sudbury is disingenuous on the part of my colleague. When it comes to pharmacare, again, this is a Liberal promise that has been brought to us for years and years and years, and yet that we still have not, that we haven't seen come into play. The difference between a Liberal government and an NDP government is that we will actually do what we say we were going to do. We started off by adding a bill to introduce pharmacare in-house. Just like the idea that we needed a majority, that we needed elections at this point to be able to work together, that's again disingenuous. We were working just fine. We were not necessarily getting everything that we wanted, but then we were indeed making gains for Canadians every day. So the idea that all of a sudden we're going to have another recycled Liberal promise is going to be come to us again for discussion, for voting this time around, with a belief that somehow things will be different. Again, it's problematic. We believe that pharmacare is necessary because of in the G20, 19 countries have universal pharmacare and universal Medicare. 18 countries have universal pharmacare and universal Medicare. Canada's the only country that does not. And so clearly it is something that we need, and clearly it is something that we can do. And clearly this is something that the NDP will put on the table and enact.
Thank you for your response. And before we turn over to Mr. Serre, I just want to remind candidates that we have just a few questions left before we conclude. So please go ahead, Mr. Serre.
Thank you. Yes, since our government has been in place in 2015, we've established now for the first ever drug agency. Prior to this, there was thousands of different plans that were buying drugs, and there was no purchasing power. So now we've put all of this together. What was indicated yesterday in the seniors debate by our conservative colleagues, obviously when you look at 25 and younger plans, 65 and older, and private pension plans, private drug plans, there is a complex plans that exist today. So the drug agency that looks at a purchasing plan, now we're looking at how do we look at putting this in place. In addition to that, we need to look at a rare drug strategy. I've heard it clearly, multiple sclerosis, ALS, there's a lot of issues. So we are putting a strategy in place to address the high cost of rare diseases. But let's be clear, unlike the NDP that could just think they could snap their fingers and say, just put pharmacare in place. We need to work with the provinces. Our Minister of Health has had round tables with all the ministers of health across the provinces. Our Prime Minister has brought this to the table with the premiers. It's really, really important. I'll give you the last example on this. The Red Cross, Canadian agency. The Minister of Health, Patty Haydu, was begging the provinces to go into the long-term care facilities in Ontario when the pandemic hit. And she was not allowed to set out the Red Cross without the premiers, the province's permission. There are jurisdictional rules. There is a constitution. We have to find ways to work together. So my point here is the federal government has put a plan in place. We are working with the provinces. We are looking at private plans to see how we could work with this to make sure this is in place as we continue moving forward.
Thank you for your comments. And we are running really fast on time here, and I appreciate all the discussion. So the final question that I have from the chat box goes to Mr. Humphrey, and the question is, healthcare is a key theme of this election. Will you commit to provide adequate federal health transfers to provinces so that, for example, organizations such as Health Sciences North are able to provide more acute beds for an aging population and more space for mental health and addictions, as well as neo kids? Your response, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to speak to a number of points. One, we are the only party committing to a guaranteed annual increase of 6% in the Canada Health Transfer. Two, we have committed to providing 500 additional or 5,000 additional treatment beds for mental health patients across the country. And three, I recognize that the Northern Ontario has been one of the most underserved, underfunded areas for both research and for care beds relative to our population. Our population is 2.2% of the Canadian population, but in terms of research funding, which drives the quality of care, we receive 0.16%. This needs to be rectified. I, as a Conservative candidate, will advocate strongly for the North and for healthcare for all Canadians to ensure that healthcare needs of rural Canadians, including Northern Ontarians, is met by providing the provincial governments with stable, predictable funding to allow them to better plan their priorities on a long-term basis, rather than the patchwork, unpredictable funding with significant strings attached currently being offered by the Liberal government. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. And I would like to thank all the candidates for their responses to the questions and the audience for posing such thoughtful questions. And now I would like to hear the closing remarks from each candidate in reverse alphabetical order as a reminder, and you will have 2 minutes to provide your response. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Serre for your closing comments, please.
Thank you, everyone. I want to congratulate and thank all the candidates for sharing their views. And thank you to the Chamber for organizing this event and making it safe with the gathering here. I heard clearly from people in Nickel Belt over the last 6 years, and that's my job as a member of Parliament. And I've said it before, I love my job. This is a dream job for me, is being able to work with individuals, work with organizations, work with provincial, municipal, and federal governments to make your reality, your projects happen. So for me, the job of an MP is to listen, to be heard, to make sure your voice is heard in Ottawa, to bring this back to cabinet, bring us back to government. And the second part of my job as a member of Parliament is to bring back investments in the community, make sure we get our fair share. And Nickel Belt has not received its fair share in the past. And now we have historic investment of $675 million over the last 6 years back into infrastructure, back into municipalities, back at FedNord, job creation with businesses. So when we look at the opportunities, I really believe in Nickel Belt. I believe in the businesses that are here. When we look at the green economy, when we look at a circular economy, I know the innovation in mining is one of the best in the world. The mining companies here, the supply and services industries, the post-secondary institutions are a world leader. And we need to make sure that the federal government is there at the table, working with you, working with the province, working with the municipality to make that a reality. So thank you so much for trusting in me for 2 elections. And I really hope that you'll trust, and I could earn your trust to get to a 3rd term so we could continue working together and make Nickel Belt a better place to live, work, and play. Merci.
Thank you very much for your comments. And we will turn to Mr. Humphrey next for your closing statement, please.
As I've said at this debate and the previous debate yesterday or the day before yesterday, really in this election, you have two choices. You have three parties that are offering very nice sounding, but reckless and unfocused spending plans. And you have one party that's offering Canada's Economic Recovery Plan, which is a very well-researched, well-structured plan that will get this country back on track economically and socially. You have three parties that seek to stoke division by demonizing firearms owners, by, as Mr. Trudeau did yesterday, referring to those who oppose his particular views and choose to protest him as those people in rather dehumanizing, othering language. And you have a party that seeks to bring Canadians together and get us back to work. This is still one of the greatest countries in the world, but we need to realize that we are in a very difficult situation. Empty promises and broad, reckless dreams are not going to get us back on track to the kind of sustainability, social stability, and economic growth that we need to continue to provide the kind of life that our children expect and that we would wish for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphrey, for your comments. And we will turn next to Mr. Gravel for your closing statement, please. Mr. Gravel, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm going to use this time as much as I can to talk about a guaranteed livable income, as it is at the forefront of my campaign. Guaranteed livable income or universal basic income is great for people and businesses. Nothing is better for businesses than customers with expendable cash. Giving everyone an income floor doesn't make people unwilling to work. It makes them unwilling to accept exploitative work. CERB itself did not cause a labor shortage. I have no doubt in my mind that CERB recipients would have continued working had there not been the condition that the recipient not earn more than $1,000 in a month. Do I think inflation is the scary boogeyman that it is often made out to be? No. Will we need to spend money to help pay for a program like this? Yes. But this shouldn't be seen as a cost, but instead an investment in future generations. A guaranteed livable income gives people more choice, dignity, and opportunity, including the opportunity for people to start their own businesses. Government spending is already really high. The thing that we need to change is the priorities in spending and how we spend the money. Again, spending money isn't the problem. How we spend the money is the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel, for your comments. And last but not least, we will turn to Ms. Chenier for your closing statement, please.
So I want to start by saying thank you again for the invitation to speak. We've heard about many different issues from very different perspectives. I want to thank Mr. Serré for taking the time to mansplain what childcare looks like and to correct me when I said that the first childcare promise was 30 years old. In fact, the first childcare promise by the Liberals was in 1984. In addition, I've also heard a lot of hiding behind the Constitution. It's not a blanket. I mean, in the end, when it comes to medical care and pharmacare, federal government sets standards for the provinces to operationalize. If Tommy Douglas were here right now, he'd be rolling around in his grave at the state of our healthcare system right now. In the end, what we're looking at right now is the choices will be about priorities. The New Democrats, we're not like Justin Trudeau's Liberals. In our case, our priority is you. I'm focused entirely on ensuring that the residents from Gogama to Killarney, Sturgeon Falls to the Valley have what they need, that they have the necessary services to be healthy and happy while they're living in financial security. New Democrats, we don't leave anybody behind. We believe that we're better together. We believe that together we can make change. So when you're thinking about your options, the NDP is the clear choice. Together, we can build a better future because we are ready for better.
Thank you very much for your final statement. And I want to personally thank all of the candidates. It's very important that we hear from candidates when we're deliberating on casting a vote. And in closing, your candid responses to the issues that we raised here today are very important to us, and we thank you for those replies. We'd also like to once again thank our event partner and sponsor, the Sudbury Real Estate Board and Collège Boreal, for your generous support. The Greater Sudbury Chamber of Commerce urges all voters of this community to exercise their option to vote on September 20th. And I can't stress this enough. We hope that tonight's exercise has helped you in better understanding and being informed on the issues and we hope that you keep those in mind when you cast your ballot. I want to thank you again for joining us here this evening and wish you all a very pleasant evening. And thank you again for attending. Good night, everybody.